House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain. O God, you are the source of all wisdom. In your goodness, please continue to inspire these generous women and men as they serve the people of Minnesota. Bless them in their labors and help them to know that their work is greatly appreciated. With joyful confidence, we lift our hearts and minds in this humble prayer. Amen. The chaplain for today is Reverend James Peterson from St. Odelia's Church, Shoreview, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 89th Session, 20th Day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Thursday, February 26, 2015.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House file number 2.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House files 1281 through 1399.
First reading, House files 1281 through 1399. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 134. The clerk will report the bill.
House file number 134, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to veterans.
I call on the member from Washington, Representative Dettmer, to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In 1923, a property of Big Island Veterans Camp offered camping and recreational dining facilities and so forth for our veterans. This happened in 1923. They had a large dining hall on the property, and it was constructed on a high central knoll on the property with a variety of cabins that were there. Campsites were developed. Well, in 2003, the camp was sold, and the Vets Camp Board of Governors voted to dispose of the property and use proceeds for veterans' needs throughout Minnesota. House File 134 is basically will eliminate some language that is obsolete. And the Board of Governors of the Big Island Veterans Camp, after they disbanded it, they figured they better update their Board of Directors and the language that controls the board. The camp and this bill is supported by the Commander's Task Force, the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, and also the Department of Purple Hearts and American Legion VFWs. And I ask you for a green vote. Thank you.
There are no amendments on the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House file number 134.
Third reading. Further discussion on the bill. The member from Beltrami, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to rise in support of this bill. As was described, the camp, the Big Island camp, is in a transition, and they need to be able to work with dispensation of that, and so we need to change some statute, and that's what it's about here. So, urge your green vote.
Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Garofalo votes aye. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed. Clerk votes aye. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 423. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 423, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health, the first endorsement.
I recognize the member from Grant, Representative Backer, to introduce the bill.
Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I would ask for your support for 423. It does have bipartisan support. I thank Representative Schoen for his support. What this bill does is it really helps grow Greater Minnesota Volunteer Ambulance Services, and it does it 2 ways. Number one, it gives the control of running an EMR, which is a first responder, with the EMT, with the ambulance. So it gives that control back to the medical director instead of the EMS board. And then number two, what it does is it allows rural ambulance services to work directly on a mutual scheduling. There are sometimes, because of the low number of members on the crew, a service cannot cover a 12-hour period. And so what this bill does is it allows services to work together to cover those times. So I would ask your green vote on this so we can help get the rates out of the garage when someone dials 911. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 423.
Third reading. The member from Beltrami, Representative Hancock, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Red Lake Nation Day at the Capitol, and we're honored to have with us today members from the Red Lake Nation, some administrators and staff, some hereditary chiefs, and it's my special honor to introduce to you today the Red Lake Tribal Chairman, the Honorable Darrell Seegey. Would you please give him a warm welcome?
Any further discussion on the bill? The member from Washington, Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to rise in support of the Backer bill, but first I'd like to know if the author would yield to a couple questions.
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Backer, appreciate you taking this bill. This is going to be great for many small towns and communities across the state. I just wondered if you could clarify a couple points. I know that this came to policy, so I didn't see it or wasn't part of the hearings in that area. But can you just clarify who's going to hold the agreements and how are we going to be able to know that they're working or anything like that about maybe auditing? How does that work out? Do you have those answers? We're going to be able to make sure that they're being followed and that the actual services are being met.
The member from Travis, Representative Backer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Schoen. Before the agreement can be made in regards with mutual scheduling, a written agreement has to be done between the neighboring services to work all that out. So a service cannot just call and say, will you cover this time? So a written agreement has to be made, agreed upon, before that can be done. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And
Representative Schoen.
And members, this is going to be a helpful piece of legislation. Quite frankly, at this point in time, in areas of our state where many of you represent, there are ambulance services that are just abandoned during the day as it stands right now because there's just no one in town. And Representative Backer's bill is going to allow for a local first responder unit to be able to drive the ambulance in, which technically isn't allowed under law right now. And it also allow them to honestly work together and actually get the ambulance out the door and to the scene sooner than later, rather than waiting for 4 or 5 pages for someone to show up at the ambulance garage and get the truck that's not going to get out the door in the first place. So thank you, Representative Backer. I would urge agreeing to vote on the bill.
Any further discussion on the bill? The member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger. I'll learn these counties yet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise today in support of this bill. It's an excellent bill for all of Greater Minnesota. When we call 911, we just take it for granted that someone will show up. This is a big step in that direction for Greater Minnesota to ensure the safety of all Minnesotans. And I want to thank Representative Schoen and Backer for getting behind this.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Lane votes aye. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The member from Hennepin, Representative Clark, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to invite people to welcome to our chambers a gentleman who's here from Somalia, Mohammed Almi Afra, who is a presidential candidate for the Interim Central Administration for Somalia. This is a gentleman who's been active in humanitarian efforts dealing with Somalia for more than 20 years, including with the United Nations. I just want to invite people to welcome Mr. Afra, and if you get a chance to go and talk with him afterwards, and if I just ask him to rise, we will welcome him, give him the Minnesota welcome. Thank you.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Weekly move that House Bill number 5A be called from the Committee on Commerce and Regulatory Reform and be referred to the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the Paid Family Leave Bill, which Representative Garofalo so graciously has agreed to hear in his committee. And to be consistent with the path for the tip penalty bill that he's moving through the process, this bill should properly be in Jobs, not Commerce, and both chairs have agreed to that.
Any discussion on the Winkler motion? Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the fact that the author of the motion misstated the name of my other bill, I am going to let it go to my committee.
Any further discussion on the Winkler motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Winkler motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
We will move that House Bill number 834 be recalled from the Committee on Environment, Natural Resource Policy and Finance and be referred to the Committee on Commerce and Regulatory Reform.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Uglum, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 834 contains consumer protection statutes with regard to the plastic microbeads that are in our waters. I've spoken to both chairs, and there's agreement that it should start off in commerce.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Uglum yield to the question?
He will yield, Representative Hansen.
Representative Uglum, I
Is it your intent, following its ultimate passage in Commerce, to go back to the Environment Committee, or is there another path that you're looking at this bill moving?
Representative Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hanson, yes, that's correct.
Any further discussion on the Eagle motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the Eagle motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Gavel move the House Bill number 1065 be recalled to the Committee on Mining and Outdoor Recreational Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, Policy, and Finance.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Ublem, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 1065 is an invasive species bill, provides for education on invasive species, particularly with regard to trailers and boats. I've spoken to both committee chairs on this, and we want to refer it to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
Any further discussion on the motion? The member from Dakota, Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ublem yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ublem, I know there are several bills relating to the invasive species decal that was to go into effect this year. Could you tell me which bill this is? Is this a repeal bill, or is this the amended bill? Which one is it?
The member from Hennepin, Representative Ublem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hanson, this is the DNR agency bill.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ublem,
He will yield. Representative Hanson.
Representative Ublem, so this is the overall bill that includes a variety of modifications, but it is not the repeal bill?
Representative Ublem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hanson, yes, that is correct.
Any further discussion on the Ublem motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
House moves the House File number 2, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lynch, to your motion.
Thank you, Speaker. I ask for a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 2 has gotten off track a little bit. Not just last week. Last week you found out you got a fiscal note. I did not take part in that debate. That was a separate thing. People saw it as whether you want to see it as partisan or not, because House File 2 is a priority for you guys. Even House File 2, I get that. I understand that. However, you've also got the House rules, which we passed a little over 2 weeks ago. It was 2 weeks ago last Thursday that House rules were passed. And we're already making efforts to circumvent them for whatever reason you want to state. I'm not going to impute motives here. The fact is, you sent it back to Ways and Means. And we see the results of what happened in Ways and Means. And the results are the exact reason why we have Rule 4.16 and why you don't try to fix data provisions in a committee that's not the Data Practices Committee. You took out provisions that were mistaken in there in the first place and didn't even apply to the law at hand, so I get that. It was maybe hastily drafted. But you forgot about 2 other provisions that are still in there and still heavily implicate data practices and fall squarely under Rule 4.16. The statute that was passed originally, on which you're hanging your hat and saying this doesn't have to go to civil law, the statute was passed in order to force collaboration on the part of teachers. But you're using it now for a different reason. In House File 2, you're using it to try to affect purposes of layoffs. Now, agree with it or disagree. In this chamber, some people on both sides would agree or disagree. You cannot dispute the fact that is a data practices provision. And it is the reason why Representative Holberg, who's sat right over there, Representative Hamilton sitting, worked with this chamber to put Rule 4.16 in the first place, because it is taking a set of data that this chamber and this legislature passed for one reason, and we're using it for a different reason. Now, why should that worry us? Well, because we get requests, I get requests like that, Representative Scott gets requests like that about every other week. What if we did that with your health data? What if we said, well, we're going to take the data that we specifically said we're using for this purpose, and then we're going to use it for a different purpose? This chamber blows up when things like that happen. And in fact, just last week, former Senator Berglund came in with a bill proposal, I think it was Representative Priesel's bill, to suggest using data for the public health department of the city of Minneapolis so that they could track people that they've been having trouble tracking. They want their housing data. And that caused me some concern. I said, well, you might be able to make your pitch and establish some good reasons for this. However, there's no question, no one will make the argument that this bill shouldn't go to civil law. Absolutely it should go to civil law. It's under Rule 4.16. But under the reasoning that you're using for skipping the civil law committee, that one should completely skip civil law as well. And I can imagine the hue and cry that would go up in this chamber if you did. The current data that's being used to affect teacher seniority or layoffs is public data. It's all public. You can audit it. You can examine it all you want. What you're doing is creating a set of data that is private and is not viewable in the same way, and government gets to use that data, but you don't. You can't look at it because it's private. That's the reason why we fix these things in civil law and not in Ways and Means. This is not an ambush, members. I spoke with Representative Scott about this early last week. I understand the hesitancy. I understand the nervousness. Are they trying to derail our House file too? No. That's why I brought it up early last week. That's why Thursday when this came up, I spoke with Representative Loon. I spoke with Representative Knobloch. I spoke with the majority leader. And I said, this has problems. People huddle and they say, oh, this can't be a problem. We'll make sure this isn't a problem. It is a problem. Rule 4.16 applies. Mr. Speaker, Representative Scott yielded a question.
She will yield, Representative Lesh.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Scott, you're the author of a constitutional amendment regarding data privacy. Is that right?
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Lash, yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Speaker.
Lesh.
Representative Scott yielded another question.
She will yield, Representative Lesh.
Representative Scott, can you make an argument for how this bill does not set a precedent for which bills that have data implications are going to skip civil law?
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Lash. This bill has been looked over backwards and forwards by our staff, by myself, Representative Loon, Representative Knobloch, and House Research, and all came to the same conclusion that this does not need to come to our committee. They removed the mistakenly placed Chapter 13 references today in Ways and Means, and the other portion that you're referencing doesn't need to come to our committee. It's not changing the data classification.
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Scott, Rule 4.16 does not say bills have to go to your committee if they change data classification. Rule 4.16 states that the committee has jurisdiction over a bill that substantially affects either Minnesota Statute Chapter 13 or other government data practices. It says substantially affects. And you and I both know that Representative Holbert, when she was sitting there, regardless of which party had the bill, knew that this bill substantially affected data practices because it's taking data that you apply for one purpose in this chamber and applying it for another purpose. And she would have freaked out. Before the buttons on that desk were even cold from Representative Holbert, she hasn't been gone that long, we're already throwing her rule out the window. Mr. Speaker, members, this bill does set a precedent for you to do this. You'll see the bills that come through that change data, not just add in new data sets, but change how we use them. And my good friends in the party opposite, as Representative Lippman was fond of saying, should be more worried than folks on this side at those kinds of practices. You don't want that to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, members, I ask for a green vote on the motion to refer.
Discussion on the resolution, or excuse me, on the motion. The member for Hennepin, Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would just urge members to vote red, vote no on this. And I appreciate the concern of Representative Lash, but I just want the body to understand that great care has been taken to vet this issue very thoroughly with the Chair of Civil Law, with Representative Scott already detailed House research with as many people as we can. And there is no change to the privacy and the status of private data and personnel data in the bill that we're proposing. And the House rule references substantially affects other Minnesota statutes or other government data practices statutes. So we are not changing the statute. We are not changing the classification of data. And again, if I had a concern about this, I would have no problem referring it. But again, there hasn't been any rationale brought forward to indicate that there's a substantial change or even a minor change of any portion that would trigger a referral to civil law on this. So, members, I understand some folks are concerned about this bill. Maybe they're opposed to what it's doing. I understand, and we'll have a chance to debate it and discuss the merits of it hopefully later this week, but I just really don't feel this is necessary. So we've had 3 very full committee hearings on the bill, probably about 4 to 5 days now, and look forward to the opportunity to discuss it fully in the body later this week.
Further discussion on the Lash motion. The member from Ramsey, Representative Lash.
Thank you, Speaker. Just to be clear to Speaker members, I realize there's some confusion about this. When you start talking data, as you do in some of the other silos of your areas of expertise, people's eyes tend to roll into the back of their head because it's confusing. But remember this, you're taking data that we pass for one reason and using it for a different reason. That's a big deal. No one can argue that this bill does not do that. It absolutely does that. And you can see it doesn't need to go there because we talked with staff. Members, we're the final arbiters of whether the rules get followed around here. And I talked with those same staff, and they gave me a different answer. That's why we're the final arbiters of this. You get to decide for yourself, has this rule been followed, by reading the rule. So I ask for a green vote. Thank you, Speaker.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would agree with Representative Lush that this needs a thorough hearing in civil law. I served on civil law in the last session, and I'm no expert on data practice, but while I was serving on it, I learned enough to know that I am no expert on data practice. Most of us aren't. And it's fair to say that, yes, it was brought up in the committees. I was at one of those committee hearings in Education Innovation Policy, at which the concerns about the data practice aspects of data privacy were just dismissed. I watched today's Ways and Means committee hearing from home today. Representative Hillstrom brought up a number of concerns about the data privacy aspects, and they were just dismissed. We have quite a number of people on civil law. We've got a separate subcommittee just for data practices. They have many years of experience under their belts, and I think that they are the ones that ought to be taking this up, giving it a thorough vetting. We haven't had good answers to how is a person supposed to discover whether or not they've been treated fairly under the layoff procedure that uses private data from other people compared against their private work evaluation data to decide what their ranking would be for layoffs. We can't have it both ways. We can't both keep it private and have it available for people to compare it for fairness. So I think that I would urge you to vote green on this so we can send it to civil law and do what we're supposed to do and carefully consider it. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I also encourage a red vote on this. It has been well vetted. Nonpartisan House research We spent several hours with them talking about this. They saw no need. Please vote red.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I've heard a couple of members now say that you need to vote green because the Rule 4.16 somehow requires that this bill be sent to the Civil Law Committee. Well, I would refer people to the last sentence of Rule 4.16, which says, quote, "The chair of the Committee on Civil Law shall advise the Speaker on the application of this rule and may determine whether or not a bill must be referred to the committee under this rule." Members of the House, this is a permissive rule. You have heard the chair of the Civil Law Committee say that she does not believe the committee needs to see it. I think that a red vote is in order.
The member from Dettmer, Representative Thiessen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised to hear Representative I have a feeling what this fiscal note means Knobloch, saying it is in the discretion of the chair. But the fact of the matter is this is mandatory. If you actually read the whole rule, the chair of the committee can provide advice to the speaker because the chair committee presumably understands what the civil law implications of a bill are. But the language is very clear that it must recommend re-referral. It's right there in the rule, Representative Knobloch, and I know you like to be touchy-feely about these things, but the fact of the matter is this should be going to the Civil Law Committee to understand the merits of this. And here's the other question. We are aware we're at March 2nd. We have till the middle of May. I don't understand quite what the rush is. If there's any question, why wouldn't you just send it back to the Civil Law Committee to work this out? What is the rush for you to get this bill done? You have 3 weeks before the targets come out. So I don't know why you wouldn't, in the abundance of caution, actually re-refer this to Civil Law so they can work out what sound to me to be some very serious questions about this. And then send it back to the House if everything is in fact worked out. That I think is the question. I think it does beg the question of what this, as we discussed last Thursday, what this bill is really all about. So members, I would urge a green vote. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. Announcements. The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Mr. Speaker, members, thank you. I bring an invitation from the League of Minnesota Cities. Members are invited to join local elected officials at a reception Wednesday evening at 5 o'clock at the Crown Plaza. The reception will kick off the annual conference for members of the statewide cities, counties, school boards, and township associations. There will be roughly 400 attendees that are expected to attend the conference and meet with their legislatures on Thursday. Come to meet with your local elected officials. The event will be from 5 to 7 at the Crown Plaza in the Great River Ballroom on Wednesday, March 4th. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the Ways and Means Committee will not meet after session. No Ways and Means after session.
Further announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, members, I move that when the House adjourns today and adjourns until 12:15, Wednesday, March 4th, 2015.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12:15 p.m. on Wednesday, March 4th, 2015. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Peppin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Peppin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion prevails, and the House stands adjourned until 12:15 p.m. Wednesday, March 4th, 2015.